The night Lyra awakened fully, the wind did not howl. It listened. The forest around the shrine stood unnaturally still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Lyra knelt alone before the ancient altar, her palms resting against cold stone carved with symbols older than memory. She had prayed before, but this time, something answered, not with words, not with sound, but with presence. The air grew heavy. The torches lining the shrine flickered without flame, their light bending inward toward Lyra. Her chest tightened, her breath slowed, and deep beneath the stone floor, something stirred. A low vibration rippled through the shrine, traveling up her arms into her spine and settling behind her eyes. Lyra gasped. Images flooded her mind. Cities buried beneath sand, crowns shattered by fire, gods falling, not in defeat, but in silence. She understood then. The war that destroyed her world had not ended the gods. It had hidden them. Walking through halls of gold where no footsteps echoed, in one vision, she saw herself reflected in black water. Her eyes glowed faintly, not with rage but with knowledge. And a voice whispered, soft as breath against skin, "Power does not choose the worthy, it chooses the inevitable." Lyra woke each time trembling, her body drained, her heart pounding as if it had outrun death itself. The markings appeared on the seventh night. Thin, glowing lines traced themselves along her forearms, curling like living script. They did not burn. They did not wound. They remembered. Lyra wrapped them in cloth, but the light bled through. She realized with growing dread that the power within her was no longer dormant. It was growing. And power that grows does not remain unnoticed. Not forged of metal, but of magic. Deep within a black stone citadel, figures in ash-colored robes turned as one. One of them spoke, voice cracked with age. "Something has awakened." Another answered, colder, "No, someone." Ancient texts were unsealed. Dust rose from pages that had not been touched in centuries. A single name appeared again and again. Not written, etched. Lyra felt it before she understood it. A pressure behind her eyes, a crawling sensation along her spine. She was no longer alone. The shrine, once a place of refuge, now felt like a beacon. Each time she prayed, the world seemed to lean closer. She whispered into the dark, "I never asked for this." The stone beneath her palm pulsed once, as if in response. Power, she realized, does not care what we ask for. Her. "They are coming." Lyra staggered back, heart racing. Images followed the warning. Armored figures walking through fire, eyes glowing beneath iron helms, symbols matching the marks on her skin, twisted, corrupted, hunters, not of beasts, of power. She stood before the altar until dawn. When the sun finally rose, its light felt thin, fragile. The world she once knew could no longer contain her. Lyra made a decision. She would not run blindly. She would learn. She would master the power before it mastered her. And if the world had begun to watch her, then she would decide what it would see. Across distant lands, signs appeared. Rivers changed course overnight. Old relics began to hum. Dreamers spoke the same name without knowing why. Lyra, a name once lost to war, now whispered again by fate itself. Some would seek her to worship, others to destroy. Few would understand her. Lyra returned to the shrine one final time before leaving. She placed her hand on the stone, not to ask, but to promise. "I will not be your weapon," she said softly. "I will be your reckoning." Far away, the hunters prepared their blades, and somewhere beyond the veil of the forgotten gods, something ancient smiled. Because the child born into war had become something far more dangerous. She had become a turning point. Lyra returned to the shrine one final time before leaving. The air felt different, heavier. as though the stone itself was listening. She placed her palm against the cold surface, feeling the ancient markings pulse faintly beneath her skin. Not to ask, not to beg, but to promise. "I will not be your weapon," she whispered. "I will be your reckoning." The flame within the shrine flickered violently. For a moment, the world went silent. Then, the stone answered. A low vibration rippled through the chamber, crawling up the walls, shaking loose centuries of dust. Lyra staggered back as the markings ignited with a pale golden light. Memories not her own flooded her mind. Wars fought before names existed. Cities razed and erased. Priests who knelt. Kings who bled. She saw herself, not as a child, but as something older. Something feared. Lyra collapsed to her knees, gasping. And when she opened her eyes again, the shrine was gone. She awoke beneath an open sky. Night stretched endlessly above her, stars burning brighter than she had ever seen. The forest around her hummed with unfamiliar energy, leaves trembling though no wind blew. Lyra sat up slowly. Her body felt different, stronger. Every sound was sharper, every shadow clearer. When she stood, the ground beneath her feet cracked slightly, just enough to remind her that whatever the shrine had awakened, it was real. She did not know how long she walked. Time seemed meaningless now, but eventually she reached the edge of the forest. And there, waiting in the moonlight, stood the hunters. 7 of them, clad in dark steel, symbols carved into their armor. Ancient sigils meant to bind gods, not people. Their leader stepped forward, blade already drawn. "There she is," he said calmly. "The child the shrine refused to kill." Lyra felt no fear, only clarity. "I'm not a child anymore," she replied. The hunters attacked. They moved fast, trained, precise, merciless. Blades cut the air where Lyra had stood only moments before. She barely understood what was happening, only that her body was moving on instinct. She dodged, twisted, raised her hand, and the world answered. A wave of force erupted outward, slamming 3 hunters into the trees with bone-shattering force. The others froze, shock flickering across their faces. Lyra stared at her trembling hand. She hadn't spoken. She hadn't cast anything. She had simply willed it. The leader snarled. "So the stories were true." He lunged. Steel met skin. Or it should have. But the blade stopped inches from her chest, suspended in the air, as though caught in invisible chains. Lyra looked into his eyes. "You hunted me," she said softly. "You burned my past." The blade shattered. The remaining hunters fled. She did not chase them. She already knew. They would not stop. By dawn, whispers had begun. Villages spoke of a girl who walked untouched through fire, of hunters found unconscious with no wounds, yet unable to speak of what they had seen. Some called her a curse. Others called her salvation. Lyra moved through these lands unseen, learning, listening. The power within her grew, not wild, not cruel, but disciplined, controlled. She discovered she could feel the presence of ancient places, shrines long buried, relics forgotten by time. And worse, she could feel them, the forgotten gods, watching, waiting. One night, as she slept beside a dying fire, she dreamed again. But this dream was different. She stood in a vast chamber of shadow and light. Figures loomed around her, neither alive nor dead. "You denied us," one voice thundered. "You chose yourself," another hissed. Lyra stood her ground. "I chose balance," she said. "You fed on war, on sacrifice." Silence fell, then laughter, a deep echoing sound that shook the dream itself. "You cannot escape destiny," the voices warned. Lyra lifted her head. "Then I will rewrite it." She awoke before dawn, heart steady. The path ahead was clear now. The gods would not rule, the hunters would not claim her, and the world would no longer bleed in silence. She would build something new, not a throne, not a cult, but a reckoning. As the sun rose, Lyra stepped onto the road, toward cities that had forgotten mercy, toward rulers who believed power belonged only to them. Far away, ancient seals cracked. The forgotten gods stirred, and somewhere beyond the veil of time, Something smiled, because the child born into war had become something far more dangerous than a weapon. She had become a choice.